They say dreams are fragile things. That night, as I sat on the wedding bed wrapped in a deep red bridal dress, I realized how quickly they can shatter. My mother used to tell me, these are Saiyan people, noble, wealthy, respectable, you'll be happy. And I believed her because I had spent my whole life clutching at poverty's throat, suffocated by the fights, the compromises, and the scarcity that defined every corner of our rented home. My mother had arranged my marriage to her cousin, a man much older than me but immensely rich. In her eyes, this was my escape. A golden opportunity to live a life she once had before everything changed for her. I agreed, not out of love, but desperation. I was tired of watching my parents argue over pennies, of seeing my mother's eyes hollow from frustration, and of my father's silence that deepened with every passing year. I had never seen love between them, only bitterness. So I let myself believe that maybe wealth could offer what love never did: stability. And that night, dressed as a bride, I told myself that everything painful I had endured so far was worth it, because life was finally turning around. When I entered the Haveli, that towering ancestral mansion where my mother was once raised, it dazzled me. The grandeur, the history, the scent of old wood and power. It felt like a dream, like I had entered another world. Servants escorted me with care. One of them whispered, "This is the room of Farhan Sahib." I was to wait there, alone. My heart raced in my chest. Butterflies, anxious and naive, danced within me. I imagined my husband walking in, lifting my veil, whispering compliments, telling me I looked beautiful. I imagined kindness. I imagined beginnings. But when the door creaked open and he stepped in, something felt wrong. Farhan was tall, well-built, and sharply dressed. He didn't look as old as I had imagined, but his eyes, there was something cold in them, something unreadable. As he stepped closer and reached for my veil, I forced a smile, ready to welcome a stranger with a soft heart. He didn't smile back. In one swift, rough movement, he yanked the veil off and stared at me. Not with admiration, not with warmth, but with disgust. Before I could even speak, he grabbed my braid and pulled me forward, his other hand pressing hard against my face. I froze. My mind couldn't process what was happening. Then came the slap. Loud, jarring, brutal. I wasn't a bride, I was a target. His words echoed, sharp and venomous. I've waited years to see this face, this cursed face. I hate every inch of it. My dreams died in that moment, without ceremony, without goodbye. The sting on my cheek wasn't just physical. It shattered something deep inside me. I had never been touched that way before. I had never imagined my wedding night would begin with a slap instead of a smile. Farhan's grip tightened on my braid as he dragged my face closer, staring into me like I was a ghost from a past he wished had stayed buried. I've hated this face for years, he growled. These eyes, these lips, this cursed smile, all of it. Every time I looked into a mirror, I remembered your mother. My heart stopped. My mother. You want to know your sin? He hissed, his breath heavy with resentment. You are Bilqis's daughter. That alone is enough. I couldn't understand. My mother had only ever spoken of Farhan with respect, admiration even. She called him a noble man, a generous man, someone who had grown up alongside her in the Haveli, someone who had once been like a brother. She never told me there was bitterness. She never told me about a promise or a betrayal. Farhan let go of me with such force that I stumbled back onto the mattress, my jewelry clinking softly in the thick silence. He turned his back and walked toward the door. My breath caught in my throat. Where are you going? I whispered, my voice trembling, still not accepting the nightmare unfolding before me. He didn't turn around. To begin your punishment, he said coldly. This is just the beginning. Before I could react, he stormed out and slammed the door. A lock clicked. I was alone. The room was luxurious. Silken curtains, carved wooden furniture, gold-framed mirrors. But it suddenly felt like a prison. I sat still for a long while, not knowing what to do. Slowly, the realization settled in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a moment of anger that would pass. This was deliberate. I rose and ran to the door, banging on it, calling for help. My voice cracked. No one came. Hours passed. My makeup was smeared with tears. My red bridal dress felt heavy, suffocating. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me into sleep. Not because I was at peace, but because my body had surrendered. At dawn, the lock clicked again. A frail old maid entered, carrying a tray with water and dry bread. I crawled to her, desperate, broken. "Please, help me," I pleaded. Why is he doing this? She set the tray down gently, looked at me with pity, and said something that chilled me more than the cold marble floor beneath us. "Your mother's sins were never forgiven," she whispered. "And sometimes the daughters pay the price." I stared at her in disbelief. "What sin? What did she do?" The maid gently stroked my hair and sighed. "She loved a man she shouldn't have, and left the one who was promised to her. That man was Farhan. You are the shadow of her betrayal. And this is your curse." I sat frozen on the cold floor as the maid's words sank in like poison. My mother had always told me she came from nobility. A zamindar's daughter, raised in luxury, waited on by servants, and born with gold in her crib. She used to speak of her past like a forgotten fairy tale filled with grandeur and status. But she never told me there was pain stitched between those silken memories. The maid stood up to leave, but I grabbed her wrist. "Please," I whispered, "tell me what really happened." She hesitated, then sat beside me. "Your mother, Bilkis, was once promised to Farhan. Your grandfather had arranged it when they were children. Farhan grew up in this Haveli like a son, orphaned young, raised under this very roof. Everyone thought they'd marry one day. Farhan certainly believed it." I closed my eyes, trying to picture my mother as a young girl and Farhan as a boy. A childhood friendship turned engagement. It sounded innocent, even beautiful. "But then Bilkis fell in love," the maid continued. "Not with Farhan, but with the man who used to drive her to school. A driver, a servant, your father." My breath caught. "She defied her father, ran away to the city, married your father in secret. The entire village was humiliated. The zamindar. Your grandfather was disgraced. And Farhan, his pride was shattered. I had always known my parents didn't have a fairy tale love story, but I never knew this. My father, silent and subdued, rarely spoke of the past. And my mother? She always wore her pride like a shield, only occasionally letting it slip to show the cracks of regret. So Farhan's hatred. It's not really for me, I murmured. The maid gave a sad nod. But you look just like her. When he lifted your veil, it was like seeing Bilkis again. Not as the woman who wronged him, but as the girl who made him believe in love before breaking him. I sat back, numb. My entire life had just been collateral damage in someone else's unfinished war. I thought of my wedding, the jewelry, the bridal dress, the fake smiles. All just a stage set for revenge. I had been nothing but a pawn. Suddenly, all of my father's protests made sense. He had begged my mother not to go through with this marriage. He knew. He must have known what kind of man Farhan had become. But my mother, perhaps blinded by her old dreams or guilt, ignored his warnings. I looked up at the maid. Why didn't my mother tell me? She smiled sadly. Sometimes, when the past hurts too much, people bury it. But graves don't stay shut forever. They find a way to rise. Through us. She stood, gathered the tray, and left me once again in silence. And in that silence, I felt something awaken inside me. Not fear this time, but something else. A need to survive. A week passed. 7 long days of silence, isolation, and unanswered prayers. I stayed locked in the same room, the same red bridal dress now wrinkled and stained with dried tears. No one came, not Farhan, not a servant, not even the maid who had once shown a flicker of compassion. I began to forget what the world outside that heavy wooden door even looked like. Then, on the 8th day, I heard hurried footsteps in the corridor. The door creaked open with force, and I blinked against the sudden flood of sunlight. It was my mother. She rushed to me like a woman possessed, her eyes swollen from crying, her dupatta slipping from her head as she dropped to her knees beside me. Her hands trembled as she held my face, whispering my name again and again. I couldn't speak. I just collapsed into her arms, letting out a cry I had been holding in for days. My mother sobbed silently as she rocked me, guilt pouring from her eyes like a flood she could no longer control. Haika, how could I be so blind? She murmured. I thought I was saving you. Her words struck a nerve. I pulled back and looked at her. You knew about him, didn't you? I whispered. You knew his anger. You knew the past. She looked away. Then why did you send me here? She broke. Because I wanted to fix everything. I wanted to undo the shame I caused. I thought, if I brought you into this family, if you became part of it, maybe they'd forgive me. I stared at her, stunned. My own mother had used me to seek redemption for a mistake she made decades ago. I wasn't her daughter that day. I was a bridge she built to reconnect with a past she had severed. I made a mistake, she continued. Marrying your father, it ruined my life. I lost everything. I lost this Havali. I lost my family. I thought I was choosing love, but love doesn't fill hungry stomachs or buy medicine when your child is sick. I didn't want you to suffer the way I did. So when Farhan sent the proposal, I saw a way out. Out for you, I said bitterly. But what about me? She couldn't answer. Just then, a shadow fell across the room. We both turned. Farhan stood at the threshold, silent, watching. His face was unreadable, but something in his eyes had shifted. A hesitation, a crack in his armor. My mother rose slowly and fell to her knees before him. Her voice broke as she said, I made the mistake. Punish me if you must, but don't destroy her for what I did. He didn't speak. She went on. You want me to admit it? Fine, I was wrong. I married below my status. And I paid for it every day, but don't let her pay for it too. She's innocent, Farhan. She's your wife. For a moment, silence stretched like eternity. Then Farhan turned and walked away. But the door didn't lock behind him this time. The sound of the door remaining unlocked lingered in the air longer than any words could. For 7 days, I had heard only bolts and silence. But now, for the first time, there was a possibility of choice, a sliver of freedom I hadn't dared imagine. I didn't move right away. My mother and I just stared at the door, both of us paralyzed by everything that had just been said and unsaid. She sat beside me on the floor, her back against the wall, breathing heavily like someone who had run through fire to reach safety. Or maybe guilt. What will you do now? I asked her softly, unsure if I wanted the answer. She didn't look at me when she replied. I can't stay here. This isn't my home anymore. I came to make sure you were alive. And to ask for forgiveness. From you. Tears returned to my eyes. You're not staying with me? Her hand reached for mine. No mother should abandon her child to suffer. I did that. I see that now. But this isn't just about me or Farhan anymore. It's about you. And you have a choice now, something I never had. I thought about her words. A choice? Did I? Could I just walk out? Would Farhan really allow that? And even if he did, where would I go? Back to the cramped rental home where silence and suspicion hung like cobwebs between my parents? I felt a deep ache in my chest, not for my mother, not for Farhan, but for the child I used to be. The girl who once believed that getting married would finally end all the noise, all the tension, all the longing. But marriage hadn't saved me. It had only changed the nature of my cage. My mother stood, dusting her clothes as if she were erasing years of shame. "I have to go," she said firmly. "Your father doesn't know I'm here. He would never forgive me for breaking the promise I made to never return to this village." She reached into her bag and placed something in my lap, a small golden pendant shaped like a bird in flight. "This was your grandmother's. She gave it to me the day I left this Haveli. I never wore it. I didn't feel I had earned it. Maybe you will." She kissed my forehead and whispered something I couldn't quite catch. Then she walked away. I waited for the sound of the door to lock again. But it didn't. I waited for Farhan's shadow to return, but it didn't. That night, I didn't cry. I simply stared at the pendant in my hand, the symbol of women who had been caged before me. I wasn't sure if I was free, but I wasn't locked in anymore. That, at least, was something. The next morning, I rose from the floor with aching limbs and a hollow heart. The red bridal dress was now dull, its embroidery tangled and torn. I peeled it off, one layer at a time, as if shedding a version of myself that no longer existed. The version that believed in fairy tale weddings, that trusted promises, that thought money could buy peace. In the corner of the room stood an old, tall mirror. Its frame was carved with intricate roses and vines, delicate, feminine, regal. I hadn't dared to look into it since my first night here. But today, something urged me forward. I stood before it and finally looked at myself. What I saw made me gasp. My eyes were swollen and bruised beneath, my lips dry, my skin pale, and yet there was a strange strength in the reflection. I looked like her, my mother. The same high cheekbones, the same shaped mouth, the same storm behind the eyes. No wonder Farhan had reacted the way he did. But this time, I didn't see that as a curse. I saw survival. The door creaked open behind me. I turned, alert and ready for whatever came next. It was Farhan. He entered slowly, dressed in white, no guards, no servants, no arrogance, just silence. His face had changed. It no longer bore the tightness of hate, but the looseness of weariness, like a man who had been running toward revenge only to find nothing at the end. "I expected you to leave, Asays," he said quietly. "I thought about it," I replied. We stared at each other. He broke first. "I hated your mother, not for leaving but for choosing him, a servant, over me." His voice trembled. "But when I saw you that night, I didn't see you. I saw her, and all that I lost. I wanted to make her feel what I felt, and I used you." I swallowed hard. "You didn't just use me. You destroyed something I can't get back." He lowered his gaze. "I know." There was a long silence between us. Not the heavy, suffocating kind, but the kind that searches for healing. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said finally. "But I want to make this right." I looked at him, really looked, and realized he was no longer the terrifying man who had slapped me. He was still guilty, still wrong. But something in him had cracked open. Maybe it was my mother's tears. Maybe it was my silence. Maybe it was his own reflection in this Haveli. What would that even look like? I asked softly. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I want to try, if you'll let me." My hands clenched the golden pendant. "I don't know if I can ever love you," I whispered. He nodded. "I don't expect that." We stood in that moment, two broken people standing amid the ruins of old decisions. It wasn't an ending, but maybe it was a beginning. A few days passed. The door was no longer locked. Meals were served regularly, and I was free to walk the Haveli's hallways, but I didn't go far. I didn't trust the silence. I didn't trust him. Farhan hadn't tried to approach me since that conversation. Maybe he didn't know how to. Or maybe he knew he needed to give me space. Either way, the wounds were still fresh, and though they had stopped bleeding, they hadn't healed. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and golden light seeped through the tall windows, I wandered into the old study. Books lined the shelves from floor to ceiling, and the scent of aging paper filled the air. Stories of others' lives trapped between hard covers. I didn't know why I walked in. I suppose I was searching for something, A distraction, an answer, or maybe just a place that didn't feel like mine. That's when I found it. On the edge of the massive wooden desk, tucked inside a dusty drawer, lay a bundle of old letters, tied with a red ribbon, yellowed with time. My fingers hesitated before untying them. The top letter was addressed not to me, not to anyone I knew, but written in my mother's handwriting. To Farhan. My breath caught. It was never sent. The envelope was sealed but had no stamp, no creases. I opened it with trembling hands. Farhan, it began. I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know if I should be writing it, but I owe you something. The truth. The letter went on to describe how my mother had struggled with her feelings, how she had tried to ignore her growing affection for the man who was always present, always silent, always respectful, the driver, my father. I didn't plan to fall in love with him. I didn't even realize it until it was too late, she wrote. But when love comes, it doesn't knock politely, it breaks through. She spoke of shame, guilt, fear, of how she ran away not out of rebellion but out of helplessness, and of how deeply she regretted hurting Farhan. The boy who had once brought her mangoes from the orchard, who remembered her favorite songs, who believed in a future that never came. I know I destroyed your trust, she wrote near the end. What is, huh? But please, Farhan, if one day you find it in your heart to forgive me, do it not for me, but for the girl who might one day carry my name. She deserves peace, even if I never found it. I stared at the words for a long time. The letter had never been mailed, yet somehow its arrival into my hands felt fated. I folded it carefully and placed it in my lap. And in that moment, I knew that I was no longer just the daughter of Bilkis or the bride of Farhan. I was the chapter that came after the silence. I didn't return the letter to the drawer. I kept it, folded neatly, pressed to my chest like armor. My mother's words had pierced through the years, through betrayals and secrets, and settled inside me with quiet clarity. That night, I sat alone in the courtyard under the open sky. Stars blinked gently above the Haveli, the same sky that must have watched over my mother when she escaped, and over Farhan when he stood alone in his grief. The world had turned many times since then, but it had brought all of us back here, to the same soil, the same silence. I didn't hear Farhan's footsteps, but suddenly he was standing a few paces away, not too close, not too distant. The moonlight made his face look older, not by years, but by weight. You found the letter, he said softly. I looked up at him but said nothing. He sat on the marble bench across from me. I used to read it, late at night. Every time I felt I was forgetting her, I read it again. Just to stay angry. Why didn't you destroy it? I asked. He exhaled slowly. Because it was the only thing left of her that still felt honest, her voice, her guilt. They made me feel powerful, like I still had something to hold over her. And when your proposal came, I thought, finally, I can make her feel the pain she gave me. You didn't punish her, I said quietly. You punished me. He nodded shamefully. I know. There was a long pause. The wind rustled the neem tree in the corner of the courtyard. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. This Haveli had witnessed too many secrets, too many shattered lives. I didn't want to become just another one. You could have let me go, I said. That night after my mother begged, you didn't. Farhan looked up. Because I didn't know what to do with the hatred once it ran out. I kept you here, not because I wanted to hurt you anymore, but because I didn't know how to fix what I broke. I stood up slowly. Maybe you never can. Some wounds heal, but they leave scars. He didn't stop me, but just as I reached the steps, I turned back. You want to make this right? I asked. Then stop seeing me as her. I'm not Bilkis. I'm her daughter. I have her face, yes, but not her choices. Give me mine. Farhan looked at me, and for once, not through me, not into the past, but into the person I was, standing there, trembling yet unbroken. I will, he said. I didn't smile. But I didn't walk away either. Maybe punishment was over. Maybe peace had just begun. Or maybe this was the space between both. In the days that followed, something subtle began to shift within the Haveli. It wasn't dramatic or immediate. No grand gestures, no apologies carved in stone, but silence, once heavy and cruel, began to soften. Farhan kept his distance, as if understanding that healing could not be forced. His presence was no longer a threat, but neither was it a comfort. We lived under the same roof, yet carried different storms. His made of ashes, mine made of memories I never chose to inherit. I spent most of my time in the old gardens. They had once been my mother's favorite place, or so the maid told me. She used to pick jasmine there, braid it into her hair, and hum old folk songs. I tried to imagine her as a carefree girl. Before the rebellion, before love turned her world upside down. One afternoon, I found the same maid there again. She looked at me smiling as she gently pruned the bushes. "Your mother used to come here when she was upset," she said, without me even asking. She believed plants understood pain better than people did. I nodded. She must have felt very alone. The maid glanced at me. She was. But she was strong and foolish. A pause. "And you?" she asked gently. "What are you?" I didn't know how to answer. I wasn't just someone's daughter. I wasn't just someone's wife. I was a witness to other people's mistakes, and yet I was living their consequences. Later that evening, I received a message. Farhan wished to speak with me in the study. For a moment, I hesitated. But something inside me, the same voice that had survived the locked room, the slap, the shame, urged me to go. When I entered, he stood near the window holding an old folder. He looked uncertain. "I've asked the family lawyer to come," he said, "to rewrite the inheritance papers." I blinked. What inheritance? He opened the folder, revealing property maps, share documents, and old deeds of this Haveli, the surrounding land, and the portion of your mother's rightful property, which your grandfather never gave her. I want it transferred to your name. I stared at him, stunned. Why now? He met my eyes, and this time there was no bitterness, only sincerity. Because I was raised in this Haveli as an orphan. Because your mother gave up her share when she walked away. Because your father could never give you anything except love. And life made sure even that was questioned. Because I owe you. And because you deserve to choose what happens to you now. My throat tightened. "And what if I choose to leave?" I asked. He didn't flinch. "Then I'll make sure you go with dignity. Not silence, not shame." For the first time, I felt what my mother never did. Not pity, not regret, but power. I stood at the edge of the Haveli's grand courtyard, the morning sun casting long shadows behind me. The same walls that had once echoed with silence and pain now felt still. Not peaceful, not yet, but no longer hostile. A car waited at the gate. I had made my decision. Farhan had kept his word. The inheritance papers had been signed. My name was now etched into the records of a legacy I never asked for, but I wasn't leaving because I wanted to escape. I was leaving because I had found my voice, and I finally knew what I deserved. Farhan stood near the doorway, watching silently. The same man who had once slapped me, locked me away, and looked at me as if I were a ghost from a cursed past, now stood with eyes softened by remorse and a face lined with quiet acceptance. "I won't stop you," he said as I walked toward him, "but I hope you know, if ever you wish to return, this place will be yours, not as a prisoner, as its rightful queen." I didn't reply immediately. I looked around at the marble floor, the towering columns, the echoes of generations. "You once said I would suffer for my mother's mistakes," I said. "I was wrong," he replied. "You suffered because I couldn't see the difference between love and revenge." I nodded, feeling the weight of 100 years of history resting on my shoulders. "You took away my first night, my dignity, and nearly my spirit." But you also gave me something my mother never had: the truth and choice. He swallowed hard. I wish I could undo what I did. You can't, I said. But you didn't leave me in darkness either. That matters. I handed him the letter, the one my mother had never sent. Keep it. Not as a wound, but a reminder of how easily love turns to poison and how hard it is to cleanse it. He took it slowly, nodding. I walked past him and reached the car where the same old maid waited to say goodbye. She pressed my hands warmly. You were brave, child. Braver than all of them. Inside the car, I looked back once, and at the Haveli, the arches, the man who had once been my nightmare and was now just human. When the car rolled forward, I didn't cry. I wasn't running away like my mother. I wasn't returning like a defeated girl. I was leaving with dignity, with the truth, and with the strength to begin again. They say history repeats itself, but I didn't let it. I was born from silence, raised by conflict, and nearly buried under someone else's sins. But in the end, I wrote a different ending, my own.